here and get ready. This is the Noise Pollution Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Noise Pollution Podcast. As always, I'm your host Blake. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you each and every time you tune into a brand new episode. How y'all doing out there this week, guys? I am doing well. Better than I've been over the past couple of weeks. So, first and foremost, I do want to apologize for missing a little bit of time for some newer episodes. The last one you guys heard from me was Swapcast number 4 with my boy Brandon from Badass American Heroes, where we interviewed co-owner of Led by Iron, Josh Jeans, for the monthly Swapcast for September, which was also our very first video podcast ever. So thank you guys for checking that out. The response on YouTube was absolutely phenomenal for launching that. It exceeded any goal that I had by far for that, and I appreciate it very much. Look, I'm not going to come out and say I have a million excuses as to why that wasn't an episode last week. I think I'm going on 3 weeks now, but well, whatever. I lost track. But a lot of really personal shit's taking place in my life over this course of time, and I honestly couldn't get to it. And that's the answer. I mean, I'm not bullshitting you guys. Take it for what it is. Believe me or not, that's what it is. So, but we're moving forward here. We got a brand new one tonight, and I am really excited to dive really deep into this one. I think this is going to be a very interesting episode, and an episode that was basically catered to the likes of the Noise Pollution Podcast, and the reason why I wanted to start this fucking podcast to begin with. So guys, my guest for tonight is Garrett Wood, and he is the owner and operator of Gnosis Therapy. He is a certified master hypnotist, a certified massage therapist, and a certified strength coach. So Garrett owns and operates a pain and performance clinic in downtown Long Beach, California, where he uses compassionate coaching, unlocks movements, and motivations in movements. Garrett is humbled to work with entrepreneurs, weekend warriors, and athletes of every sport. Gnosis Therapy is dedicated to self-efficacy consulting through manual, mental, and social therapy to restore the solution to pain and performance, so you can just be more of what you love. Well, there it is, guys. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to this episode, and I'm not going to hold you guys up. This is about to be the shortest intro I've ever released for an episode of the podcast. I think you guys are very thankful for that. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Garrett Wood. Well, you know how sometimes you have things planned and you get things in order, right? And you check all the boxes and you do your homework, your research, whatever else you think you have to do to prepare yourself for something. And sometimes that takes 3 times in a row. And what I'm referring to is tonight, this interview with Garrett Wood. What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. Thanks for that introduction. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah, I was almost considering that at this point, the universe was really just not wanting this interview to happen for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, I think I'm good with my karma and everything like that, but I don't know, man. It's been tricky.
Yeah, I think it was a timing thing. It wanted us to be on the same page, I guess.
I guess so. It's crazy how the universe works in ways sometimes, but fear no more. We're here. We're now together. Now, what I'm referring to in the beginning here, guys, if you didn't understand that, this is the 3rd attempt for us to sit down and actually record this interview. That's finally happening at this point. All my typical recording software just completely failed, but that's okay. We're over it now. I'm taking a breath. I'm cooling down now at this point, and we're moving on. So, so Garrett, thanks, man, once again. And shit. So tell us about yourself, man. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have a hard time answering that every time. So, I own a pain and performance clinic in downtown Long Beach, California. So people come see me here, and we what the work looks like is different for everybody that shows up. But what the intent is to get them out of pain and moving better, whatever sport that is or activity, but then also even in their life too. So whether that's pursuing a business or school or just having healthy relationships with themselves and others. In my mind, it's all actually the same thing. And people typically show up on my doorstep after they've pursued the diminishing returns of looking at those things as all separate aspects, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. Now, I have a question for you about this. So, I mean, we talked beforehand and everything. Now,
yeah,
what specifically are you doing to help people are struggling, right? They come to you, and like you told me, is that they get to you and they've come to like a plateau in whatever it is that they're trying to improve on, whether it's personal health or their sport or business, whatever it is. And they come to you and they may have plateaued or they're struggling with whatever it is. And that's what you do. You help them overcome those struggles and those difficult challenges that they face. I mean, like, what specifically do you like mean by like you're helping these people overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I would say I don't really do anything. I just help them figure out how to do it. So it's pretty fun. So I use, if they're physically in pain, we kind of check and see where their movement's at. Can they flex and extend their neck, their trunk? Can they rotate their arms, their feet? And if they can't, then we kind of look, can they move actively? Can they move passively through some range of motion tests? And if they can, then, we work on either, joint mobilization or tissue interventions. And it's interesting, sometimes someone can't move their neck right or left of their own volition. But if you lay them down and you put your hands on them and you actually move their neck for them, they have completely no pain and full range of motion. And so at that point, it's not a joint or a tissue issue. It's something else going on. And it usually is something that we like to call motor control. Meaning that when they go to move their neck right or left, it doesn't feel safe to the person doing it for whatever reason. And so when their nervous system is in charge, they hit a no. Versus when I'm doing it for them or on them through passive range of motion, there's no restriction at all. And so a lot of people have been to a massage therapist or a chiropractor or a physical therapist, and everyone's like, nope, you're fine. X-rays check out, MRI checks out. There's no tissue issue here. Everything's fine. We've adjusted all the joints are good, but they're still experiencing pain or discomfort. And so they show up here and we look at what that could be. And sometimes it's like scar tissue on their body somewhere else. Sometimes it's proprioception stuff going on like sutures of their skull. Sometimes it's that they can't stabilize their trunk. And so we do some activation there. And then the other times it's actually really weird stuff. And that would be like they can't make a decision. They have a relationship that they're not satisfied with, like interpersonal relationship, or they have some other stuff going on that they can't get over. And so they experience it as a symptom in their body or a body syndrome, and it ends up stopping them from being able to perform.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I got into what I'm doing mostly now, where I'm helping people with business and, their own personal business, so they're stuck in that, and then their personal relationships, and then getting stuck in motivation. Is it ends up being like a thought or a belief they have that's in conflict with some other aspect of their environment or some other things they're trying to accomplish, and they get stuck by those beliefs. And so then we actually work on those beliefs, and I typically use hypnotherapy to help them with that.
Okay. So what you're getting at here is that a lot of the times when it's not always a physical limitation when it comes to people trying to overcome certain obstacles that they have in their life, physically, mentally, whatever. Sometimes it's something much more deeper than that. Am I painting the right picture here?
Yeah,
something
exactly
deeply
right.
rooted within the emotional system, or something like a mental block from like a traumatic event from the past or something like that.
100%. That's exactly what we're talking about.
And that's super fascinating. Our human brains it's a magnificent, thing that we have. And it's we seem to forget that one of the main, principles, or one of the main purposes of the brain is just simply for survival. And with trauma and stuff like that, and I know I've personally experienced, I can say that everyone has experienced it in their life. No one is absent of it, is that when something traumatic happens in our lives, our brain loves to take that event and shove it in a box and tuck it away nice and secret. Like, oh, you're not going to see this again, right? Like, you're not dealing with this anymore because it makes you struggle. You know what I mean? But it's still there. So you're seeing in your clients and people that you deal with, like, you're tapping into these traumas and these mental, boundaries and limitations, stuff like that, and you're working through those boundaries through, that's wild to me, and how you're able to actually grasp onto that and see success in your clients with that. Now, can you talk to me about hypnotherapy? Now, obviously everyone knows what hypnotherapy is, and so can you explain to me and the listeners, like, what it is that you do, and like how you got in? Well, first of all, how did you get into hypnotherapy, and using that, learning it, how did you use that to help remove those blocks from your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I got into hypnotherapy as a client, just like I got into body work as a client. Before that, I was like, man, I don't know. So I grew up in a family where, like, our family of origin story was a lot of lack. And so I always thought, like, having money would solve all the problems. And so by the time I grew up, I was like hanging out with people that had money, but they still had even worse problems than my family did growing up. So I kind of shifted gears there, and I did a lot of running. And that stopped me from drinking as much. But then I ran so much I broke myself, so it was almost worse than the running. And I met a guy, and he helped me out with some body work, and it changed my life. So I went back to school to do more of that. And then I was doing body work, and I was helping people. They're getting better. And I'd say like 70% of the time, people could move better. They could get through their sport. But 30% of the time, like, there was no change at all. That nothing happened. It didn't matter what type of technique I was using or what type of, body work I was doing. And then one day I was helping assist one of my mentors in like a class. And I made this really awful off-color joke about not being able to tickle yourself. And so your touch to yourself is actually safer to you. It feels safe because you can't tickle yourself, but someone else can tickle you. Mm-hmm. And then I also joked that you couldn't rape yourself. And that's also true, because the more vigorous you are at that, the more fun you're having. There's no like lack of safety there, right? There's no power play there.
Right.
And I thought it was funny, and it's probably wildly inappropriate. Some people laugh, but the person I was working on and with, they had like kind of a connection to that emotionally. And so there was this really interesting pain that she had been experiencing, that she'd had treated by so many people, and she had seen no change. And me making that off-color joke plus doing the tissue work at the same time clicked something in her programming, and that pain released. That emotional trauma was gone from the body, along with the physical display of that. And that was 3 years ago. And I couldn't really explain it at the time, what had happened. And I didn't know how to like make sense of that. And I was obviously wildly embarrassed as well. And I got very lucky. We're still friends, and she's still out of pain, so that's good. But that's kind of where I was like, what the hell? It was a big question mark for me. And so over the next 3 years, I just kind of kept looking around for what the answer was for that. And there's a lot of things out there, like Emotion Code, The Body Keeps Score. These are kind of some books that talk about it. There's a guy named John Sarno who believes that all pain that's chronic pain is actually just emotions trapped in the body. And that very real emotional and mental pain is expressed as very real physical pain, but it doesn't mean that there's any structural damage there at all. And so that's kind of interesting, but none of that really taught anybody how to work with it, if that makes sense. Like, they're like, yep, that's a thing, so good luck.
Yeah, that's a thing. Oh, well, just deal with it. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's this book called The Great Pain Deception. It's by a guy who, I forget his name off the top of my head anyway. He talks about this. He talks about how he had pain in his back, he had it his whole life, and how he went to these doctors and all of them thought it was this like degenerative disc disease or osteoarthritis or spinal stenosis. And so he had all these great, terrible stories about how he was going to have bone-on-bone syndrome in his back, and he was going to be in pain his whole life until he got fused spine or surgery. He believed it for a long time. And then he read Dr. Sarna's work and decided that he wasn't going to believe that anymore, and that pain wasn't real, it was just in his mind. And so he decided to golf and hit thousands of golf balls every day. And if you read this great pain deception story of this gentleman, he goes on this journey where he's just like, nope, it's all bullshit. It's all in my mind. I'm going to work through it. And so he's experiencing this pain every day for years, like 5 years. And he's just not letting it stop him from running or hitting golf balls and sitting on like bouncy balls at work and whatnot. Anyway, so he suffers through this for 5 years, and then the pain eventually goes away. And it's interesting to me because I feel like that's one way of doing it. And I feel like that's a very like Navy SEAL way, like take it on the chin. Pain is weakness leaving the body, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if anybody else is going to be helped by that story, right? That's definitely one way to do it. And I think it's probably because he looked around and everyone was like, yeah, it's not real. It's in your mind. So just soldier on.
Right. Well, the mind's... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. So I feel like that's not wrong. I just feel like it's a shitty answer, right? So there's some really cool stuff that people are doing with VR and like augmented reality, where they put people in there, like burn victims. They'll put them in a VR video game where they're like playing snowball fight with snowmen, and they'll be so distracted by the snowball fight that people could actually change their bandages. And when you pull them out of like the burn victims and you ask them on like a SUD scale, like a subjective scale of pain, like how bad was it on a scale from 1 to 10? And they're like, it's a 2. I could tell what you're doing and I knew it hurt, but it didn't bother me.
Right.
Because they were in this VR experience, you know, with snow, playing snowball fights with snowmen.
Mm-hmm.
And so that seems like an interesting way to deal with pain, but you can't live in an augmented reality your entire life and still get to work unless you work for like Blizzard or someone cool like that. But so looking at what that is, it's mental imagery, right? Being in that world. And so I kind of looked around at what that looked like, and there's a lot of like guided meditation. There's yoga that they talk about that inner space. Buddhists talk about that. Monks. But I wasn't about ready to go become a Shaolin or anything. So that didn't seem like that was a satisfying answer either. And then there's a lot of psychedelics you can do that they say help with pain. And I think that's probably interesting and way easier than going and hanging out in a monastery for decades. But still not effective for most people. Like, I don't know a lot of grandmas that are going to drink mushroom tea, you know? So
I'd love to watch that, though.
That would be a great YouTube channel. Grandma's drinking mushroom tea.
Yeah. Coin that right now. It's copyrighted Garrett Wood. There you go. You're welcome.
True. That would be a great... I would sign up for that every day, right?
Absolutely.
Like, that would just be entertaining every time.
Today on Grandma's Drinking Mushroom Tea. Knitting on mushrooms. Absolutely. That sounds awesome.
It does. I think we can get some volunteers for that show. Yeah.
I don't know. That's a tricky question though, because I'm trying to find. So you have to have some certain criteria without going too far off the deep end here on a crazy sidebar. You know, with age and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm not going to get it too. We can talk offline about this if you're serious about it.
I love it.
Yeah, me too.
So trying to figure out something that's actually ascertainable for the general public, right? Like a treatment you could do to people that's like really effective at helping people on this problem. I stumbled across like an idea of like theta and alpha and beta and gamma waves, right? Mm-hmm. Like altering conscious states and like different rhythms of oscillations of your brain that put off energies or whatever. And I was kind of through the psychedelic symposium this spring, but they talk a lot about that's why psychedelics work. It's because it shifts your brain, because it kind of shuts down like the normal freeways that your thoughts run on that make up who you are. So when you're on drugs that are perception altering, like hallucinogenics, mushrooms, DMT, LSD, it's going to shut down those freeways. So then someone has to, like, these programs still have to run. You still have to breathe and pump blood and pee and eat, digest. And so they have to run on all these other neural networks. And so that kind of changes people's perception, not only what the information they're taking in, but how they can make those connections. And then when they're subsided from that experience, those new neural networks are in place now. And so they have more options to run programs, so they can actually change who they are as a person, personality-wise, based upon that, which I think is super cool. But once again, you got to get people to do drugs. Like, that's a weird, like, that's going to be not, I don't know, it's pretty illegal. I don't feel like going to jail. So it looked like hypnotherapy was another alternative to do that same thing. Because what it really is dropping you into a theta alpha state where your critical mind is kind of bypassed and you're more receptive to like learning. And then it's reimagining stories that you tell yourself or beliefs you tell yourself in a way that you don't have to like believe them as true or not, because it doesn't conflate or conflict with what you already believe, because you kind of bypass that like beta gamma state.
Right.
And now you're more in like a suggestible, like flowing in and out of consciousness kind of state. And you can be told something different and you can decide if that's going to replace your other limiting belief or not. And over time, it kind of changes the subconscious mind and makes it at least a little bit more neutral, if not way more neutral and way more positive over time. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, like you said, there is a lot of options for helping, tap into that subconscious, deeply rooted, traumas and fears and things that limit us, not just physically, but also that we put up these major mental barriers that hinder us from, getting better and helping us, or that stop us from achieving things that we want. I don't know if you're a fan of Tony Robbins or not, or, have heard or listened to his things at all before. But he has this Netflix documentary out. It's called "I'm Not Your Guru," and he talked about it in there like years and years ago, like when when he was much younger, when he was trying to make something of himself, and he was becoming physically active. He would go on long runs, and he would just every day he would tell himself, "I'm the shit," and he would just say it over and over and over again until he started believing that he was the shit. And, this is one of those types of things, if you repeat something like that to yourself, it's like a mantra, you know what I mean? You don't have to say I'm the shit, you know what I mean? It can be whatever. And, you build up that it replaces something in your mind. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking about a little bit there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but you're tapping into when you're doing like hypnosis on these people, like you're tapping into their subconscious. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're getting deep in there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm watching them get deep in there, right? Like they're the one doing the work. I'm just hanging out.
Yeah. What's that like from your perspective, watching someone who's basically like they're conscious, like, right? They're aware, but they're not really aware. It's like the monkey brain. The monkey brain part of our mind is shut down, and you're talking to like the true self almost, in a way, the one that the part of you, the version of you that you don't even see half the time, or maybe all the time, or no one else really sees either. It's just kind of buried in there. Yeah. What's that like talking to that person? Yeah,
I think that's a great, like, you're like, what is that? Who is that person? Right.
Yeah. It's trippy.
Right. Like, and it's funny. I used to drink a lot, and I had a lot of friends that were like, I started hanging out with them when I was sober after I stopped drinking as much, right? And they're like, "Are you all right? Are you okay? What's wrong?" And I'm like, "No, this is just who I am as a person." And they had never actually seen me sober before, right?
Right.
And then I don't know who that person is, because by the time that person's around when I'm drunk, I'm blacked out, right?
Sure.
So the person they knew who they thought was me, and the person I knew who I thought was me, they had never actually met, and then they were being introduced to two different versions of myself, right?
Right.
And so you can ask which one's the real version or the non-real version. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. But when you're talking about the subconscious mind, I would argue it's the part of you that's always there, always listening. And the consciousness is a little bit more limited because it's really just the software experience. And so it's collecting all the sensory information, and it's just compiling that into a map or a drawing or a painting or a version of what's actually true. But what it's compiling is everything you've also ever experienced. So it takes all that information and then processes it through a ton of programs that you've run your whole life, all the learnings of who you are as a person and your experiences and your sum total version of that. And then it's taking that information, running it through that, and then it's spitting back out whatever that experience is. So there's nothing as good or bad. It's inherently neutral. But because we've learned these things at a young age, incident after incident after incident, like whether you think you love dogs or whether they're terrible, depends on your experience and it's unique to you. So even if you had a clone and we cloned you right now in this moment, 5 days from now, they'd be different people because of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so that conscious mind is really just a collecting place for all of that information. It's not actually even a thing. It's just the only thing we're aware of. If that makes sense.
No,
so,
totally.
So something happens and you react, and then you go, if you ask yourself, why did I react that way? You're going to create a story. And that story is just a story. It's not actually true. It's just something you tell yourself. And then if you tell it to yourself long enough, you will choose to believe it because it just makes sense and it becomes part of the subconscious mind.
Yeah.
Just like you were saying, Tony Robbins going for a run. If he's saying, I'm the shit, every 3 steps, I'm the shit, I'm the shit, I'm the shit, I'm the shit, and he runs 30 miles a day every day, then eventually he's no longer thinking anymore when he says that, and it just becomes a mantra. Like you said, it loses all meaning to his conscious mind, but his subconscious mind is listening to it, and eventually it chooses to believe it because it's heard it enough.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah. So when I'm there and we're hanging out and we're talking to the subconscious mind, it's very vulnerable. It's, because they have their eyes closed. And if you've ever been in a room with someone where, like, have you ever kissed somebody and you have your eyes closed and then you open your eyes and their eyes are open?
It's super weird.
Super weird,
oh,
right?
God.
Yeah, that's awkward. No one wants that feeling. No. That's not good feeling for anybody.
Yeah.
So just knowing that you have your eyes closed and someone's alone in a room with you with their eyes open is a little jarring. And so the most important part of any session that I do with anybody is making sure that we're buddies and that we're on the same side and that I'm in their corner and I'm doing what's best for them. And that's the most important part. And without that, no therapeutic process can happen, right? So
sure, yeah. That's super interesting. Now, I've never had hypnotherapy or anything like that done before, but I've read lots about it, and obviously you see the magic portion show of it as for entertainment purposes. But obviously we're talking about two completely different things here.
Yeah.
But one of the things, I know this is a little off topic of what it is you do professionally, but one of the things that about hypnosis and stuff like that really intrigues me and interests me. Have you ever heard of the name Dolores Cannon by chance?
No, I haven't.
Okay. She's this elderly woman and a very spiritual person. But she they're talking like 30, 40 something years ago. The story goes with her is that her husband was in the Navy, and I think she went to school for psychology or something like that. I don't know. But she went for hypnotherapy or something like that as well, and she was helping people in the service with, I think, trauma or maybe physical therapy or something like that. And then she ended up tapping with hypnosis. She tapped into like past life regression stuff. But that's just one person that I've heard that's I guess made more famously. Her name's Dolores Cannon. I don't know if anyone wants to go ahead and look that up if you want. But the whole past life regression thing, have you ever looked into that at all?
Yeah, actually, where I go to school, or I went to school for hypnotherapy, they have a course, like a certification course that's in addition to the school that's separate, and you show up and have clients in it, and they take you through it and mentorships and things. They do a lot of that. And so there's two different ones. There's past life regression and then there's clinical past life regression. And it's interesting because one, the clinical version, they're trying to use what they're couching past life regression as basically metaphor. okay, so you're in a past life, you're tilling a soil, and you're working really hard, and you have a heart attack, and you're actually burying yourself. You're digging your own grave, and then you come back into, consciousness, and you remember the story from past life regression. And they would use that as information, like, okay, so do you feel like you're working and being underappreciated and digging your own grave at work? Oh, interesting. Okay, now we can move forward with our regular hypnotherapy or our regular. It'd be like a breakthrough, like in talk therapy, where you're just dealing with a conscious mind, but you're finding all of these blocks because you can't chew your own teeth, right? So if you're in normal psychotherapy where you're just talking with a person, at a certain point, some of these behaviors are subconscious, and it's not something you can talk about because the story you're telling isn't the truth. It's about something else that you don't even know about. Mm-hmm. So even if you're a hyper-aware person, you're going to run into some blocks with that eventually. And so I think past life regression is an awesome way to access that subconscious and see what's actually going on and get around that conscious mind. But there's another aspect where there's people that believe they have lived many lives, and there's karma, right? And that rule of like, if you live good life in this one, the next one you come back and you're better. And every one you kind of get rewarded back and forth like that in the circle of life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really fascinating myth, and I believe in the power of myths, and I think it's interesting. I don't know, because by definition, if you die and come back, you wouldn't know over and over and over again. True. But you would have scenes and stories, and you would have these ideas, and maybe that's what deja vu is, and maybe that's what you're meant to do with fate and purpose and healing and trauma, and I think all that's fascinating, and I think you might even be able to make an argument that we're affected by epigenetics, and so something happens to you in this life, it gets stored in your DNA. That DNA gets passed on to the next person, right, through the zygote and all that fun stuff. And then that DNA is then encoded with the epigenetics of the experience of the person before them. That would absolutely be part of the primary brain or instinctual reptilian brain. And you're going to act on that as part of your programming in your subconscious mind. And then you're going to recreate some of that stuff consciously as well. So I think it's fascinating. I am absorbed by it. It's entertaining to me to think about. If I want to stay up at night and never sleep again, but it's an awesome way to go.
Yeah.
But it definitely, there's people that are out there 100% believe that with all of their soul, and their belief in that makes it so much more powerful than my belief of it. But the nice thing about hypnotherapy is I'm working with somebody, so it's all about them and what they believe. It's not about me and my beliefs. And so I've worked with a few people, and we've done some of that work together. And it's been amazingly impactful for them, getting through some mental blocks and some emotional stuff. And they really seem to find a big benefit from it. And I think it's fascinating, and I'm so grateful to be a part of that in any way. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we've had this conversation before in a past life. Who knows? Maybe that's why we're having it now.
Absolutely. Maybe. You never know.
Right.
Yeah, I mean...
You never know, right?
Yeah, that's true. You don't know unless you know. Wait, I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. It's one of those things, right? That's a philosophical conundrum. You can only be certain of so little, and then you got the rest of it based on faith and belief. The more you believe, the more real it is for you, and then the more it actually is real.
Right.
So,
no, you're absolutely right with that, because I read this one book one time. It's called Conversations with God, and
I like that.
Yeah, and there's a portion in that book that really stuck out to me, and I think pretty sure it always will. And it kind of if you're read something and it's like your truth, but you found it in insides of something else outside of you. It's that really rings true within me. I can firmly, just hearing that one time, it feels absolutely true to me. And it stuck out to me very well. And what he was talking about is illness and disease and stuff like that. And in this book, to preface it quickly, this guy, he's very frustrated with his life, and then he's basically almost at the point of suicide, and he starts writing down this angry letter to God. And then, so he says, and he wrote throughout the whole book, is that God spoke back to him. And that's what the whole book series is. It's a literal conversation with God as thought through himself. But the part that stuck out to me, one of the parts that stuck out to me the most, is that when they break down the word disease and they're talking about illness, and it's, well, think about disease, diseasement, you're uneasy, and it kind of just broke down from there, you know, on people being very unsettled with a lot of things in their life, where they have lots of deep rooted trauma and stuff like that. You know, a lot of us, you know, I think we can all agree is that a lot of our initial traumas that we carry into our adulthood lives and in our mature lives is from childhood, you know, from whatever reasons. So it's, I don't know, that the whole aspect is very interesting to me. And it's like the whole part of convincing yourself. You know, we have, you know, Dr. Google these days. You know, we can self-diagnose ourselves within 30 seconds if we feel a certain way. You know, I don't know.
100%. No, I think there's so much truth to what you said. And like the first, like the fun part about that is like when you said you found something external from yourself, that when you read it externally, you were like, whoa, that's exactly what I believe. And that validation, when you have an internal thought and you haven't even put the words and you see it or feel it or hear it, and it's like 100% your thought and it's completely independent from you, like that's just like an eerie feeling, right? Like that's just like confirmation, like what? Like validation. I love that feeling.
Yeah, it's like you had that thought like before somewhere, but like you never like remembered it until just then, you know? It's like that deja vu we just talked about.
Yeah, and it's just like, well, that's true, and you're just done. You're just like, yep, done.
Yep,
signed off. Checks out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's wild, man.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. But I think you're also right. Like the dis-ease being a disease, first off, if you're in pain, like that's dis-ease, right? Yeah. But I think we could talk about pain on a lot of different realms. And I like talking about pain because it's so fascinating, because it's actually an output from the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not actually something that's in the tissue. It's a feeling that you get based upon the information your body receives. So you can actually like catch the feeling of pain. So there's something kind of cool if anybody wants to go check it out. It's called the rubber hand experiment. And basically what it is they take a rubber hand. It's got to be the same color of your skin, or close enough anyway. And then they put the rubber hand on top of the table, and they put your hand on top of the table. So it looks like you have two hands on the table, one yours, one rubber. And then they take your other hand and put it underneath the rubber hand. And then someone strokes the rubber hand and your hand in the same type of external stimulation. So if it's like a feather or like a paintbrush, they would paint your hand and rubber hand at the same time with two different brushes.
Mm-hmm.
After about 30 seconds to 2 minutes of that, your mind has now mapped over the look of that paintbrush brushing your rubber hand and the feel of the paintbrush on your hand. And it has now decided that that rubber hand is yours.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting part is if they do something scary to the rubber hand, it actually causes physiological changes in your real hand.
Like you would feel that pain almost.
You would feel the pain, and then you would actually even have tissue inflammatory responses.
Really?
So you would have, yes. Not only would you experience the pain and be like, oh my God, that was so scary, you would be like, oh shit, look at the marks on my hand.
Wow.
Look at the blood swelling. Look at the contusions. So your body would actually create the actual inflammatory responses on your own skin, your own tissue, even though nothing actually happened to it physically.
That I have seen that experiment before, and it is absolutely wild. I think that's crazy that we think that we are intelligent beings, right? We're constantly growing and changing throughout the years and developing more and more. But even still, like, humans have been around for a little while, right? We've figured some things out. We've done a few things. And even still, something like that experiment proves that, our brain is still just like, it's very complicated, yes. But easily manipulated in a way. And it's like you kind of like hacked your brain there for a minute. You know what I mean? Like by tricking it with the rubber hand, you tricked it.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I was reading something the other day, and they were basically saying that when they first started broadcasting, right? So you were doing a sound check and trying to make sure that my voice and your voice showed up relative to each other over millions of miles, right? So talk about technology advances, like that's wild, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it took like a couple times for us to get it right, no big deal. Like considering the span of that, right?
Sure.
It's, the miracle of that is wild to consider. But the other part about that is when they were syncing up video and voice over broadcasting, they were trying to figure out, they were afraid that, basically it would look weird. And you've probably seen those old like Japanese movies where it's like dubbed over and like the voices don't sync up.
Yeah.
And it's like a bad dub job. Well, they figured out that like basically you have all these different receptors in your body that collect information: light, sound, vibration, touch, smell, and then it creates that experience. But all of those receptors work at different rates, and some of them are faster than others. And so there's actually a lag time, and for your body to create, or for your mind to create what you perceive as reality, it has to work off the slowest receptor. So they figured out that they could do 100 milliseconds of lag time on sound with video, and you still wouldn't notice.
Right.
So that's actually documented that there's a lag time there, and that basically what's actually happening and what your perception of it is completely not the same thing.
Huh.
And then if you are stressed out, not slept, not fed, and there's like an imminent threat, like something bad is going to happen if you don't do whatever,
mm-hmm.
that lag time, that like ability to trick the mind gets infinitely bigger. So you can break someone's perception pretty quickly if they don't sleep and if they don't eat and if you create some ongoing stress in their life. And I think if you look around at most Americans, and most people for that matter, even if you scroll through Instagram for 10 minutes, you're like, damn, I'm not making enough money. I'm not having enough fun in my life.
For sure.
I thought I was doing good with my beer, but I guess I got to upgrade my beer and my cigarettes and my clothes and my car. And I'm working really hard. I didn't even sleep last night.
Yeah.
And then I'm drinking a lot of coffee and, sweets, so I'm not getting any protein. So then I would argue that most people are pretty damaged and they're actually not operating at like full capacity of what their brain's capable of. And they're getting manipulated because of that.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's pretty scary. So oftentimes when people come in, what we're actually doing is like, hey, you're okay. It's safe. You need to get some sleep. You're going to eat 4 meals. They're going to have protein at each one. And like, it's all good. We're actually like de-hypnotizing people.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that stage show of hypnosis, right? Where people are like collecting like chickens.
Yeah.
Doing Kung Fu. I don't know. Those are the ones I've seen. What have you seen on those?
Oh, the stage ones?
Yeah.
Usually it's the typical, like you see, like, you're a chicken, and then I saw one, it was you're like an opera singer. So they would just start singing like opera style. It's super weird.
Yeah. So I guess the trade secret, probably gonna get in trouble for that.
No, do it, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Those people show up and they're already hypnotized. So
right.
The hypnotist isn't actually doing anything. Those people are hypnotized when they show up to the show.
Okay.
And they're not actually inducing a hypnotic state to those people. They're just asking for them to pay attention to their suggestions versus anything else. But they're actually walking around in hypnosis at all times.
So we're already there. They're just okay. Let me get this straight. So
yep.
you go to the show, you get pulled up on stage, right? You're already there.
Correct.
You're hypnotized already. Now the guy tells
yes.
you to hop around like a frog, and you're like, okay, cool, I'm a frog. I'm gonna do that. Without you really
yes.
thinking about it. And that's not a stage act. That's like someone who's just he's already I'm having a difficult time wrapping my mind around this because it's just what you said there, it baffles me. Could you elaborate?
People that
elaborate, please, if you could.
Yeah, so there are people that are more suggestible than others. That's
Yes.
just how that works. Like,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's people that are better at reading than others. There are people that are better at like writing than others, right? So everyone's on a scale of everything. So there's some people that are more suggestible than others, and then there's some things that people choose to do that make them more suggestible even. So that would be, watching television would make you hyper suggestible, like a ton of it, right? Like just so much of it. And then not eating would do that, like starving yourself from protein. And then not sleeping would do that. And so then let's say you're suggestible to 30% of the population, right? You're like, that guy sounds smart. I like that guy. He's nice. He looks like me. I'll believe what he says.
Mm-hmm.
And now you haven't slept. You haven't ate. You've watched that guy 100 times on TV. Now you're like 50% more suggestible to that person. And
right.
Then if you're showing up to a show and you're like an outgoing person who doesn't mind being made fun of or making fun of themselves, you're going to raise your hand when they ask for volunteers. So there's a certain type of person that shows up on stage at those shows.
Mm-hmm.
And the hypnotist isn't necessarily actually hypnotizing that person. That person already showed up hypnotized. They're just asking for volunteers.
Really? Oh, wow. Now that you said that one point right there, it stuck out to me. I've only seen like a live hypnotism one time in that manner. And you talked about the preconditions that make someone more susceptible to like that pre-hypnotized state. So we were overseas. We were deployed. We were in Iraq, and they bring in like things all the time just for like what do they call it? Like entertainers, cheerleaders. They'll come in once in a while, stuff like that. A band sometimes, but at one time it was a hypnosis guy. And,
yep.
You said about like the people being susceptible, and I can think back to the people that were on the stage at that time. And the one person in particular I can see, like you said, is typically very outgoing person who's not afraid to get laughed at, whatever else. And then I was like, okay, yep. Now I completely understand that now. You broke that down for me.
Yeah. And I have a lot of buddies that love being wild and crazy. And the more wild and crazy it is, the better the story is. And they all tell them those stories. So, getting up on stage is like exciting for them. They're like, that's a win. Yes. Right. So they're already excited for that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they're like, I'm here to have a good time. So if you're there to have a good time, you're excited to get on stage, check. Like your critical mind is already not worried about it. But there's some people that are in that situation and they're like, get me the hell out of here. It doesn't matter what party they're at. They're like on the wall, hyper vigilant of everybody at all times, where they're watching everything at all times, like not participating. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's different personality traits. And so a good skilled, stage hypnosis is leveraging that, just like a good judo fighter is going to leverage their opponent's weight. Right.
Yeah.
And it's for everyone's benefit, right? We all get to laugh at someone who wants to be laughed at, and like that's a win,
Sure. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Huh, that's interesting.
It's pretty wild though. Yeah, it's super interesting. And I think that's most people's exposure to hypnotherapy. And so I think it's really interesting to talk about how that hypnotist didn't actually hypnotize anybody.
Wow.
They're I wouldn't say cherry picking, but they're recruiting the excited subjects that are ready to be hypnotized even more. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're already willing enough. It's like magicians as well. It's like obviously the dude on stage, no matter how convincing it may look, there's some sort of trick,
Yep. Yeah. And so that's the trick. The trick is, what do they say? The devil's biggest trick is creating the belief that he never existed, right? So the stage hypnosis trick is convincing people that he actually hypnotized people, but he didn't.
Right.
They were already done. The hard work was already done for him. Yeah. So
what do you do post? Like, so a client comes in, you work with them for a while. Now, I mean, I guess I don't know a while. That was just a response I had. But what constitutes for you and a client, like, how many times do they come back to you for hypnotherapy? Or, I guess is the hypnotherapy would be included in what all you offer at your business.
Yeah.
Okay. So they come in, they get the whole package deal, right? And they're getting everything worked on and, hypnosis and all that awesome fun stuff. How often does that happen? Like, can it be like a one-time thing? Is it something that you have to work on and develop over a period of time? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So typically in my practice, to get people out of pain, within the first 4 sessions, they are like from like a 8 or a 10 down to a 2 or a 3. And if that's not the case, then they're not my client. Like, when there's stuff that shows up in my office that's absolutely out of my scope, and I refer those people out to, whether it's a clinical psychologist, whether it's a, doctor of physical therapy, or whether it's, some good imaging or something going on. There's a lot of stuff that, appears that could be easily treated. It could be something that's actually like an actual real physical thing that needs to be addressed. And so there's a couple things I do to make sure that I'm operating inside of my scope of practice. And so those people, because I've selected them, just like the stage hypnosis does, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to charge people money for something that's not going to help them. And so I screen these people to make sure that it's inside of my scope and it's something I can actually help them with. And with that being said, usually the first session, there's a dramatic reduction. Second session, they're feeling really good. Third session, they feel like they know what they need to know to make those own interventions. So I give people homework and they work on it. And anytime their pain comes up, they know what to do to treat it in the moment. So that way they end up becoming their own caregiver, their own purveyor. And so that's really fun for me. So I may not be the most affordable per session, but I'm definitely the most affordable all the way through treatment, because they end up treating themselves more often than not with their homework. That makes the biggest change in the long run. And that's if someone's showing up with pain. If someone's showing up and they have like a mental emotional block and it's not causing pain in the body, but it has them stuck in their life and they can't figure out why, those take a little bit longer to suss out, because you have to get to know the person. And you only get to know people over time, right? It's kind of like dating. You might have love at first sight and figure it out the first time, but sometimes that's not always true. And even if you think it is, it doesn't always work out. I've been there before. So with a client, you're like, oh, I think this is what it's going to be. Let's go for it. And then, sometimes it works and it's one session, they're good. Sometimes you get head faked a few times and they do too. And there's like a trust building relationship that takes time to understand what's actually going on. And that usually takes 4 to 6 sessions. For things like weight loss, it takes a little bit longer. Usually that person has to see, like, I would say 6 months or 90 days. And they're seeing you about once a week. I've had a client who we worked every week on and off, pretty much every week for about a year. And that was a weight loss client. And part of it was that she didn't trust me and she didn't trust herself. And then the other part about that is weight loss is a rough gig. It takes time to burn calories in versus calories out. And she really wanted to feel like she got all the results and that she was able to maintain them, because she had lost 150 pounds before, 50 pounds at a time, but she was always the same weight. Meaning she'd like lose 50 pounds and then gain it back. And she did that 3 times before she came into my clinic. And so we hung out together for a long time to make sure not only did she lose that weight, but she kept it off as well. And it was interesting. She lost the weight, then she gained some of it back, and then we were able to get her back down again, and she gained a little back, and we got back down again. So it's kind of that old adage, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing.
Right.
But that was a while ago now, and she's still successsul. So
that's
pretty
awesome.
Exciting.
Yeah, that's got to feel pretty rewarding to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, you just gotta breathe and not worry about the expectation and know you're doing the best you can every day. Mm-hmm. Because it's really not about me. It's about, the actual venting process, the actual getting into that, say, the alpha state is actually healing in of itself.
Right.
And then the learning that someone feels that takes place, and where they're actually changing how they feel about themselves. Like they actually feel like they're worth caring for. And it's tough. If you're a mom, or a father, and you have kids that you have to care for, you have a job you have to care for, sometimes we place these priorities over our own health and our own care for ourselves. And it seems reasonable to do that. And I wouldn't argue that it is to a certain point. But at a certain point, it also tips the scales where it feels like it becomes like a codependent relationship. And that's when that, parent or significant other puts themselves below the value of the other person that they're taking care of. Mm-hmm. And their health starts collapsing in because of that. And that's fine for like 3 months or 6 months or even a year or 2 or maybe 3. But if it just becomes who they are, the person, that's when those transformations, being a part of just being in the room with those people as they're going through that is so humbling, and super rewarding to see that change. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, you saying that right there, I think you spoke to the larger percentage of this country right now, I believe. We're I think we're caught up in this society today that I'm not saying social media is to blame by any means, because people should have the ability to, differentiate between what's actual true reality or what's just a show. You know what I mean? And, comparison is the thief of joy, obviously. And a lot of people out there, comparing themselves to the people that they follow on social media, Instagram and stuff like that. And they compare their shitty life compared to this person's fabulous life with all this money and time to work out and blah, 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 blah. But things half the time with a lot of these people are really, it's not as they seem, and I think a lot of people have troubles differentiating between the two. But
yeah,
we talked about that earlier, but yeah, it just kind of reminded me of something like that.
My arms definitely do not look like Chris Evans. They definitely don't look like Chris Hemsworth, and they definitely don't even look like Chris Pratt, right? Like, I'm definitely not, and I lived in a gym for like a decade of my life, right? Mm-hmm. And it still didn't look like that. And so if I'm like there working every day and I'm comparing myself to these people I see on screen, and that screen's everywhere, right? Like, it's not only at the movies, but it's in my house, and I'm watching it at night, and it's on my phone, and I check in more with them than I do myself. And that's the ideal of what I'm trying to do. It's weird because the more time you spend in the gym trying to look like that, and then the further it feels like you are from getting there. And even if you make, like, I don't know, let's say you get an inch into your guns or 2 or 3, and it took you 6 years to do that, and then you look at the screen and you're still even further, it feels like you're almost further away than these dudes who are watching on screen. And that itself will actually break you.
Right.
That is, well, you're just like, boom, done. Like, that belief, like, no matter how hard I try, the harder I try, the further I get from it. Oh my God, you're done. Now you're not even going to show up and do what you can do. You're like, well, what the fuck's the point?
Right. Now, is that because, like, when you're trying to compare yourself to someone else, right? Is it because you kind of created like this preconceived notion that you're not going to be that good?
Yeah. I think, those guys that I mentioned them specifically, they're supposed to look like superheroes. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and look at James Bond and Sean Connery from like the 1950s, he was like 190 pounds and like 6'3". Like, that's a big dude, and he was strong, but he's not 260, 230, 220.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
He was just kind of a lanky guy, right? He'd probably be really good at crew and golf and tennis. But he's definitely not any of the Chris's, right?
Sure.
So I think, we fetishize a lot of stuff in modern culture because that's what it takes to, like, stand out from the crowd. And every time it stands out, then someone gets, you got to fetishize even more to stand out even more. And it's this race to extremes. And, most people aren't there, right? Or they're not going to be there. Or they couldn't be there. And I think part of the reason that's why we idealize those people. We're like, whoa, that's so awesome. And that's, I think some of that's good because it gives you something to work for. But then I also feel like it's bad too, right?
Yeah.
So it's just about maintaining healthy perspective, comparing yourself to the progress you've made, and then not looking about where you're trying to go, but just really do it because you enjoy it in and of itself. Mm-hmm. I feel like, people like Lance Armstrong or like Dean Cardenas, who's like the ultra marathon guy.
Yeah.
They're like genetic freaks, like actually genetic freaks, like enlarged hearts and like lung capacity and like physiological rates of like lactic acid can like turn over faster than most people can. So they're like genetic anomalies. And then they also love the sport, and then they've also been doing it longer. So if we're talking about like exponential factors of performance, those are amazing things, right? So,
right. They're superhumans.
If you don't, exactly. That's exactly, they are real life superheroes. And so if you're comparing yourself to someone like that, you're kind of being a dick. You know, like, what are you doing? Like, of course you're not going to look like that, right? Of course that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So, don't be a dick to yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Just be proud of the shit you do. And if you don't love bike riding like Lance Armstrong, then like you're never going to be Lance Armstrong. If you want to be Lance Armstrong, you have to like love bike riding more than that dude does.
Right. Yeah.
And then, and even then, that's just going to get you to like break even with them because you don't have the genetic anomalies of an enlarged heart, right?
That's true.
So
that's true.
Yep.
Yeah. Just a key word, guys. Big takeaway: don't be a dick to yourself.
Yeah.
If there's anything you guys get from the night, it's don't be a dick to yourself.
Yeah.
Words to live by. I love it.
Yeah. I feel like life would be a lot easier if we all just were kind of a little bit more compassionate to ourselves. And then I think we'd be nicer to everybody else too. I think if someone's mean to somebody, they're probably also mean to themselves.
I think about that a lot, man. Honestly, I do. I have 3 young kids, so I see a lot of other kids and parents and stuff like that. And, I'm not trying to compare my parenthood or my parenting skills to others because we all live completely different lives. I would say just generally speaking, the way we raise our children is probably a lot differently than the majority of people that live around where I live. But I see a lot of that right there is people who are just assholes to their kids a lot. I see a lot of parents who are just straight up assholes to their kids. And I get it. Kids can do shit to just piss you off to no end, right? But
yeah,
what's that create? One, that's what kind of mental challenges is that going to embed in that child's brain? 2, then I think about what happened to that parent, at some point in their life to make them be such a certain way. You know what I mean? And then that's like going back to what you just said. You talked about how if we were all nicer to ourselves, we could share that love to everyone else and kind of just embrace that all together.
Yeah.
Be quite the change.
I don't have kids, so but I definitely, my dog's not allowed to sleep on the couch. Because I like my couch. I also love my dog.
Yeah.
But I don't think that should have to be a compromise between the two. And I had taken her to a babysitter because I was traveling for a long time, so dog sitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she came back and she was able to get on the couch there, so she got confused. And I got up to go pee. I came back, she was on the couch, and I went and grabbed her by the scruff of her neck and pulled her off the couch. And now forever and ever, my dog is going to look at me and be like, most of the time, pretty cool guy. But every once in a while, when you're asleep, he's going to come up and grab you by the scruff of your neck and throw you on the ground. Just for no reason, because she doesn't know, right?
Right.
And she'll never know, right?
No.
And so that's kind of the reason why I don't have kids.
Shit. Well, awesome, man.
I mean, managing that anger and managing your expectations, because most of our critical mind or our beliefs or our values are actually formed of that subconscious mind from 0 to like 8 years old. And then like 9 to 12, you're just like reinforcing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you're basically right now, you're a software code writer for your kids.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
how they believe about masculinity and father figures and self-worth and understanding. All of that is completely up to you and the power of you writing code in them. And the hard part is like, you can't just go consciously and be like, hey, you're great and I love you. And that will help, right? But then they also have to feel that. And each kid's a little different the way that they receive love, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some people need gifts, some people need time, some people need words, some people need you to do stuff with them, some people need you to do stuff for them. And they all receive love a little different. And I just talked about this because I've seen it with my clients who are in their 30s plus, and they're talking about how they never received love. But then when you get into it, the parents actually really love the shit out of them. Just the way the parents showed it and the way they like to receive it didn't quite match up. And so that's some of the learnings that come out of like, the cognitive part of sessions where we're talking about that, where people are kind of blocked. So it's wild, man. The power you have to influence these young minds that are in your hands, my hat's off to you. And it's a really amazing process, and it scared the shit out of me.
Look, it still scares the shit out of me. I've been parenting for almost 9 years now. I'm still confused.
Nice, man. Yeah.
You know, I think Joe Rogan said
it.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say Joe Rogan, I think, said it best with raising kids. Like, it's like we sometimes look at kids as just these little creatures, you know, and like they're just trying to figure out the world. Like, no, like you're raising little people, you know. It's like he said it in a more comedic sense, but it's actually pretty fucking true, honestly. You know.
Yeah, you're programming people.
Yeah.
So the people you see at the park with their kids, they're just doing the programming that they got from their parents, and they're giving it on. And it worked well enough to get them where they are to have more kids. So as far as evolutionary like selection is concerned, checks out.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit, man.
Yeah. So
well,
nice, man. How old are your kids?
8, 7, and 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, man.
Boys, girls?
Yeah, 1 boy, 2 girls. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's really fun.
It's crazy busy, but it's a lot of fun too. Yeah.
That's good, dude. I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you. Well, hey, man, dude, look, this has been one, I have to say, extremely eye-opening. I've never met someone who has been super involved into what you talk about as much as you. So thanks for coming on the show, man, talking about all this, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I could talk about this all day, every day. This is everything I care about in this world. So it's pretty rad.
Well, it shows, and you know, you're very knowledgeable about your work, and I wish you nothing but the most success in what you do, man.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for letting me come on and share this, you know, with your audience and with yourself. I think it's really fascinating, you know, and it's some interesting stuff that I don't feel like. It's really impactful, but I don't feel like a lot of people know that it's out there. And I feel like a lot of people are disillusioned by the answers that are there. Surgery, pills, and then like that's kind of, or don't do that anymore.
Oh.
Those are like kind of the 3 answers people get. Like, stop riding your bike, man. Your knees are going to be done until you have to get surgery. Take these pills until it gets there.
Right.
And I just,
hey,
I don't know.
I'm dude, I 100% agree with you on that. You know, it's because we're fucking raised by television, you know? You know, that's half the, I'd say probably over 50% of commercials that you see is pharmaceutical, pushing pills, and your doctor pushing that pill because you're sick. Like, no, I don't have erectile dysfunction, man. I have a cold. Like, Jesus, dude. Fuck, that's never happened to you. Whoops.
Erectile dysfunction or a cold?
No, like you go to the doctor. You go to the doctor and they're like, "Oh, well, how's your dick working?" Like, "Oh, no, it's fine, man." Oh, well, I have this Viagra if you want to try it. You know, that may or may not be a true story. Or a story I stole from someone else, but
yeah.
Anyway.
You know, it's funny. I definitely haven't had that, but I've had the pleasure of trying Viagra, and it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, that was a pretty, it was an interesting experiment, right? Like, I'm all for experimentation, right? So,
right.
Yeah, but dude, I don't know if this is true or not. Someone's going to have to fact check this, but I'm going to tell it anyway because I think it's fascinating. So I know a lady who hangs out with shaman in the bush. Like, she goes to shamanic tribes and she tries to, like, anthropology, like, hang out with them and learn from them and then share their resources with people. And she's a great resource for me, and it's really fascinating. And I love, like, drinking coffee with her. And she told me a story once that the story behind Viagra is anthropologists went and they saw a fertility ceremony, and men were lashing their bodies with these like branches of plants, and it would cut the skin, and then there'd be some dancing and some music and some drinking, and then there'd be some babies, 10 months down the road. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so these anthropologists were studying this, and they were trying to figure out what the hell was going on with these plants and why they were part of it. It's like, was it symbolism? Was it part of the myth story? What was going on? And then they had some botanists down there, some biologists, and some pharmacologists, and they came out with the study that's actually Viagra. So that's the active ingredient in Viagra, the vasodilation. And so when they were whipping themselves with these plants, it was cutting the skin and then dropping the vasodilators into the bloodstream that would engorge penises for hours on end.
Oh.
And that was part of the fertility drill. And that's actually how we get our Western medicine and all these pharmaceuticals, is through ignoring the myths and rituals of the cultures, but taking all of their plant medicine, I guess, is the story.
Right. Well, I'd love to drink coffee with that woman as well. That sounds interesting. But yeah, I've heard about that stuff as well. And and that's the thing. I think you said it right there. A lot of people don't realize that all the drugs that we have today, originally, the concept of it is derived from some sort of plant-based something from someplace else in the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't just created from nothing. Like, oh, well, here's this pill for, your dick to get hard. No, like there's an actual real story behind that. And, which birthed to what we have, Viagra, Cialis, whatever the fuck else we have today. Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild. But anyway, that was just I love that story. I just think it's fascinating, right?
No, always. I love stories like that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. What a great ending to a great episode. Chris, Garrett, thank you so much for being here, man. Before you go, dude, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah. So my name of my practice is Gnosis Therapy, and that's with a G. So it's GNOSIS Therapy, as in the Ra P. And you can find me on Instagram on that same handle, Gnosis Therapy. I'm pretty active on Instagram. I try to stay off Facebook.
I don't blame you.
But I definitely answer my direct messages. If there's I put a lot of information on there about mental health and physical health and how to maximize that. I deal with a lot of people that are trying to get a competitive edge and aren't quite happy with where they're at, but they're definitely not clinically something where they need to be on medication, but they're still not 100% ecstatic. So try to be proactive instead of reactive. So if anybody's curious, please go in, check out the studies and the sites and stuff that's on there. DM me if they got any questions. If they just want to chat, they can shoot me an email or give me a call. Those contact information are on both of those sites as well.
Awesome. And for listeners, if you're interested and inclined to pursue him as well, all the links for everything will be in the show notes of this podcast episode. Also on YouTube as well, will be in that nice little description box. So,
awesome.
So make sure you check him out, guys. This was a very fascinating conversation. I'm glad for the third and final time. They say third time's a charm, right? So,
yeah,
we're actually able to sit down and have this conversation. I'm glad. It was a great one, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me on, and thanks for taking the time to make it happen. I know that took some little finagling back and forth, so I really appreciate it.
Hey, man. The pleasure's all mine, dude. Thanks again. And guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Noise Pollution Podcast. Make sure to check us out on Facebook. Links for everything will be in the show notes. So for now, guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm Blake. This is the Noise Pollution Podcast. Take care, and see you in the next one.